Program Director here at Innovation Hub.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a unique format for our Seminole Innovator Lunch Hour. This is an interview with faculty innovators. Faculty innovators. How many are with the Future Innovator group here? All right, I'll bet a number of you are current innovators as well. So this is a new format for us, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Paul Marty, a professor in the School of Information. And Dr. Marty and I have a 1 o'clock meeting we're going to have to rush off to. So we're going to have a very open conversation, and it's a unique format here in that we ask our guests to bring in something that they enjoy doing, a hobby of theirs that is meaningful to them. And we talk about that hobby and illustrate that hobby while we're learning about the life of the guest and what brought them to the point where they're a faculty innovator. And so, what did you bring along with you, Dr. Martin?
Well, Ken, I brought an entire box full of D&D manuals. All right, can I put this here? Does this work?
D&D? What does that mean?
It's upside down.
Yeah, you have to face it towards you.
Like this?
Or like we're sharing the book.
Like together. We're sharing the book.
Like we're sharing the book.
All right, there we go.
Dungeons and Dragons. That's D&D.
All right, how many people are aware that this is the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons, 2024? All right, fantastic. How many people have played Dungeons and Dragons? All right, how many people were playing Dungeons and Dragons when it came out in 1974? Really? Oh.
You're very youthful for your age.
I was sadly, although I was around in 1974, I was not playing Dungeons and Dragons in 1974. But I do have a collection of stuff here that I brought that we could go through and talk about. But you asked, what is it?
So I looked it up yesterday. I'm like, I am definitely not cool because I've never played Dungeons and Dragons. And how did I miss this in my life? So I looked up Wikipedia, and I was too old for it when it came out.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Absolutely.
You're never too old for a role-playing game.
You mean never. I could have done this later in life?
You absolutely could have. You could start now.
All right. Well, maybe I will. Tell me about it.
Because if you've never played Dungeons and Dragons before, right, the most important thing to know about it is that it is collaborative storytelling. That's what it's all about. If you've ever read, hey, how many people are fans of Lord of the Rings? Okay? The books or the movie, whatever you want, right? So if you've ever watched that movie or read that book and you said, well, I would love to be a character in an adventure like that, right? Is there a way that I could be part of that kind of story? And what makes D&D and other tabletop role-playing games so unique is that it's not like a board game. It's very unstructured, but it has rules to guide the interaction. So it's a way for a group of friends to get together and collaboratively tell a story, almost usually in sort of a fantasy medieval type setting, similar to Lord of the Rings.
Very cool. Could you back up and tell us when you started playing?
So, that's going to require diving into this box.
All right, let's do it.
But let me say first what we have right here. Okay. Right? So I started playing this game in 1981. That's when I got into tabletop role playing. This is the brand new 2024 Player's Handbook, which was just released for the 50th anniversary. I don't know, has anybody seen the 50th anniversary editions yet? One hand here. They've just released the Player's Handbook. They have not yet released either the Monster Manual or the Dungeon Master's Guide or any other resources. Am I getting weird feedback?
No, they're listening nicely. Oh, you mean the sound system?
Yeah, to the sound system. I'm good. All right,
so, but
great.
before you go further, how old were you in 1981?
11.
11.
Yeah.
See, I was 21.
Yeah. But there were plenty of kids in college playing D&D. Absolutely. Right?
Not my college.
No, not your college? No. Oh, we could compare notes about that. That's for sure, right? So this, if I open this up, right?
All
right. So this is the Player's Handbook that provides everything you need to know to be a character. Over here. Welcome to adventure, right? Everything you need to know to be a character in a fantasy role-playing game. So the idea is that if you're going to be a player, you create a fictional character, you bring that to a table, and you engage with everybody else who's playing a character. And there's a referee in Dungeons & Dragons called the Dungeon Master who guides the story. Usually has the outline of the story in place, usually can either have made something up or following a pre-existed module. But nobody knows what's going to happen. Because generally how it goes is that the Dungeon Master describes a setting or a scene. Mm-hmm. All the players decide what they want to do.
How many players?
You can have as many as you want, but typically 4 or 5 is a good cutoff, because otherwise it gets kind of crowded and everybody trying to do things. 4 is sort of the classic party size for this. So one person sort of being the Dungeon Master running the game, 4 people playing. And there's a random element that's introduced in every decision by rolling dice. So you say, oh, my player's going to climb this cliff or scale this tower or fight the troll that I find hiding under the bridge or whatever, right? Yeah. So to determine whether or not you succeed or fail, it involves rolling a lot of dice. And what's unique, if you know D&D, right, is that you end up with a lot of different kinds of, oh, come on, focus, there we go, lots of different kinds of dice. So the main dice used most often are the 20-sided dice. That's primarily, that started in actually, well, now we're going to go into the history of D&D, right? But the move to a D20 system happened around 1990. And there's lots of other role-playing game out there as well. So, but we can dive into this in a minute. But go ahead. Right. We're about to ask another question.
Well, what drew you to the game? How did you find out about it?
So, I think what drew me to the game is the same thing that drives me to innovation and design and creativity and all of these things, right? When you have a group of friends that you like hanging out with and you like telling stories with and you like being imaginative and creative, it gives you a framework of rules in which to be creative, right? You can't just do whatever you want. Right, you're following a set of rules, which the new player's handbook is 384 pages long, right? So there's a fair amount of rules that you have to know as a player if you're going to play this game. But it gives you a structure in which to engage in creative conversations and imaginative role playing.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in East Central Illinois, Champaign-Urbana.
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 There's a university there.
There is a university in Champaign-Urbana, the University of Illinois, and the reason we moved there is that my father was a professor. He was a professor of French, actually, and the reason we moved to Champaign-Urbana is that he was hired to work on the PLATO project. Do you know about the PLATO project?
I heard about it.
Yeah, I heard about PLATO.
It has something to do with computers.
Anybody here ever heard about the PLATO project? I'm not saying Play-Doh like the toy. I'm saying Plato like the philosopher, but it's all caps. P-L-A-T-O.
There's Plato now.
Back in the back. All right, great. FSU actually had a Play-Doh lab back in the day. I'm not quite sure where it was, but
Love building.
Love probably, right, exactly. So Play-Doh was the first educationally focused mainframe computer system for universities, developed in the 1960s. So it was a terminal mainframe system where you would sit at a terminal with a screen and a keyboard, but all the computing power was being done on the mainframe. The mainframe was this giant, you've seen these pictures, right, of what mainframe computers were like. They filled an entire room, and that was at the University of Illinois campus. And there was an unbelievable amount of educational software that was created for this. And my father was hired to come to the University of Illinois to develop all the educational software for teaching languages. So if you studied French or Spanish or Italian or Latin, right, he designed all of that particular software. And he in fact ran the language lab at the University of Illinois, which at that time had the largest concentration of Play-Doh terminals in the world. There were 80 terminals in one room, and the students would come in and do all their language lessons there. But from the very beginning, Play-Doh was an innovation that was far ahead of its time. So in 1974, which was actually when we first got our first Play-Doh terminal in our house, which was also coincidentally the year that Dungeons & Dragons started. See, look how connecting these things up, right? The reason we got a Play-Doh terminal in our house was because my dad was so focused on running the language lab that he would never answer the phone. Now, of course, it's not like we had smartphones or personal phones or mobile phones back. He never answered his office phone. And my mom was constantly trying to get in touch with him, but he'd be gone for he was a dedicated academic who was running this. He'd be gone all the time. She would need him. She couldn't reach him on the phone. Turned out that he would always answer his PLATO messages, right? So PLATO, as an internetwork thing, people often talk about it as an early version of the internet because, of course, it was. Right? Everybody had PLATO messaging, PLATO notes, PLATO mail, the PLATO discussion boards, bulletin boards, all of this stuff. If you ever want to read a great book about the history of this technology, there's a wonderful book called The Friendly Orange Glow, which I highly recommend, and it explains the history of the technology and how it sort of laid the foundation for cyber culture. And the reason the book is called The Friendly Orange Glow is that the technology that the terminals used was a plasma display that glowed orange. I can't remember which chemical it was, but it glowed orange. This was 1974, vector map graphics, touch screens, audio, video, keyboard, no mouse. Mouse had not been invented yet, right? But touch screens. Right? So you can imagine the touchscreens, by the way, were infrared beams of light that crossed the screen. So when your finger crossed the beams, that's how it knew what you were touching on the screen. Right? Yeah. So we had a PLATO terminal in my house so that my mom could PLATO message my dad while he was at the language lab to ask him questions about, I don't know, dinner. But I'll tell you actually one more story about this. What makes the history of PLATO so fascinating was that it laid the groundwork for so much of modern computer gaming. And in fact, my very first computer gaming was on that very PLATO terminal in our house. I used to play a PLATO game called Avatar. You can look it up. Imagine World of Warcraft on a 1970s vector map, very low bit resolution graphics, but I played a lot of that, right? It was pretty amazing. There was also a very popular flight simulator game that people played all the time, and the student who developed that game after he graduated was hired by Microsoft, and they turned that software into something called Flight Simulator 1.0. So, and in fact, if you go upstairs on the second floor of this building, there's a little exhibit that has an old computer in it and some stuff. In that exhibit is a copy of Microsoft Flight Simulator 1.0. That is my personal copy, which is on display up there. And that does in fact have a PLATO origin story. And that fight between, is this an educational tool? Is this a gaming tool? Is this a tool of innovation? Drove so many of the conversations. A lot of faculty, like my dad, were so focused on this technology and its ability to assist with computer-assisted learning, right? This was the future. This is personalized. Every student had access to these personalized accounts, right? You wanted to learn. It was all customized to you. The lessons changed along with your needs, right? Yeah. This is the where we are now when we talk about AI in education, right? We're still trying to do the same thing. A lot of people at the university weren't necessarily convinced of this. In fact, there are stories of faculty that got so involved developing lesson plans for PLATO that they never published anything and were denied tenure and fired from the university, right? So that was actually a lesson that faculty had to learn. The flip side of that, so many students were excited that they had access to this system they could program on, right? And what are university students going to do when they have access to state-of-the-art? Again, they're nothing like this out in the world. This is internet-connected, vector map graphics, touch screen, right? What do they want to build? Computer games. Okay? So a tremendous fight between the educational side, because remember, everybody's using the same mainframe computer. So you're all competing over computing cycles. So the eventual solution was the computer game development was allowed to happen in the middle of the night. Right? And the educational stuff was supposed to happen during the day because there were limited compute cycles. But that fight was tremendous. And in fact, a story about my dad, when we came there in 1972 and he took over the language lab, he discovered that there were lots and lots of rogue accounts on the PLATO computers in there because so many people had created accounts for their friends who wanted to use it to game. Okay? These were not registered students at the university, right? So my dad deleted all of those accounts. And the firestorm, I've heard it referred to as the first flame war ever because it went all the way up to the president of the university. People were furious. There were people all around the world that had these accounts specifically to game on this system in 1972.
That's great.
And he took it away from them. Right? They were not at all happy about that.
So
go ahead.
So suffice it to say, you had a pretty unique environment that you grew up in.
You know, I once described the fact that my dad worked on the PLATO project and we had a PLATO terminal in my house in 1974. I said that to a professor here in the College of Education. She looked at me for about 20 seconds and said, well, that explains a lot.
And the University of Illinois was the university for early computing. They had the first immersive media cave environment there. I mean, that's where people went.
I actually have a funny story about that. I had a good friend who worked at NCSA where they had the first immediate cave environment. And the first time I ever went into a cave environment was in, I guess it was the early 90s. And you know what we did? We played Doom.
Played games.
We played Doom. So if you remember a lot of those early first-person shooters, they were a lot of fun. They were even more fun when you were playing them within an immersive cave. Right?
Yeah.
So that cave had, I think it was ceiling and 3 walls. I think it... I can't remember if they had a floor or not. I don't think they had a floor, but maybe not. Maybe, but yeah. But it was very immersive. Yeah. Fun stuff.
So the first PC came out. When did you have your first PC?
Well, so it's interesting. So I was programming on PLATO terminals in the 1970s. I got my first author account on PLATO when I was 6 years old, and I started learning how to program on this mainframe compuyer. Right. That's 1976.
That
right. Yeah. Absolutely. But my dad was always an early adopter of the technology. So we certainly had an IBM PC in 1983. We were on the IBM side of things, so my friends had Apple and stuff. But we went to all the friends' houses and we played on the C64s or the Atari and all of this stuff. And that was a natural segue to this sort of tabletop gaming as well.
So in case you didn't know, before we had computers, we played board games.
Right.
And they were pretty boring.
And board games were boring, right? If you're into board games now, the board game environment is tremendous, right? I could have brought, I have an amazing board game collection at home now because my younger son loves modern day board games. And one of the things we learned very early on, he's 15 now, but back when he was like 7 or 8 and really getting involved in gaming, he didn't like to lose, right? Like a lot of kids, right? One thing that they didn't have when we were younger was the kind of cooperative board gaming that they have now, right? So we have an amazing collection of cooperative board gaming. Because if you've got a little kid who likes the board game but doesn't like to lose, well, you grab Pandemic, right? You grab Castle Panic, or I prefer Dead Panic, right? Or things like this, which it's everybody plays against the board. So you either all win or you all... How many people play Pandemic? Okay. All right, so that's a relatively good starter game for this sort of thing. People will say things like Settlers of Catan or whatever. Catan's a competitive game, right? It's a great game, but if you've got a 7-year-old who hoards sheep and refuses to trade sheep, you don't get very far, right? If you've got a 7-year-old who wants to play board games and you've got a copy of Pandemic, that's great, because we're either all going to die to some terrible disease or we're all going to figure out how to save the world from this virus, right? And that I highly recommend if you've got kids in your life that want to play board gaming. Actually, one of our favorites for a long time, I mentioned Dead Panic. That's a great one. So you're all trapped in a cabin in the woods, surrounded by zombies, and you have to search the cabin and find weapons and fight the zombies off before you're all killed. So, which is kind of fun. And the tension on these games is great because you're playing usually against a timer, not like a physical timer, but like cards or whatever. And when you run out of cards, the game's over. So you have a limited time to come up with a strategy. And so those are fun. And that kind of cooperative gaming, right, takes us back to Dungeons and Dragons. So let me pull out a few more books, right?
Did you get the first one? Are you going to get the first
one? I'm going to go back, right?
Okay, going
so
back.
This is the 2024, right? Let's get these ordered. This is the, is that me? This is the 2014 release of 5e, right? So how many people played 5e, 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, right? Absolutely. So here's the player's handbook, the monster manual, and the Dungeon Master's Guide. And you won't be surprised to learn that I have all of the supplementary stuff too, but I just didn't bring Tasha's or Xanathar's or any of that stuff. All right. This was actually my gateway back into roleplay. Okay? And I think it was for a lot of people. And in fact, Wizards of the Coast, and we won't get into the whole issue about Wizards of the Coast and TSR and Hasbro and all of these issues, but we can talk about some other time. This was an incredibly smart move when they released 5e, because they knew that there was an audience full of people who had played D&D growing up, and that those people now had kids, right? And a lot of these kids wanted to get into Dungeons and Dragons, so they released a brand new look at the gaming system that appealed to both older and younger players. And this is what got me back in, because 2014, when is that, 10 years ago, right? So yeah, so my son would have been, I guess 5 or 6, and he was like, I want to play, right? So we started playing. And then, I don't know if I mentioned, but my next door neighbor is a huge Dungeons and Dragons fan as well, just by completely random chance. In fact, unfortunately, he's out of town today.
Somebody's got a cold back there.
Okay, unfortunately he's out of town. He's out of town today. Otherwise, I would have gone over to his house and borrowed some more of his books because he's got a lot from 3rd edition and 3.5 that I don't have because he was playing a lot then. And unfortunately, I was in graduate school at that time, and there's not a lot of time to when you're doing that stuff, as I'm sure all of you know.
So speaking of that,
yes,
if you don't mind,
sure.
I'd like to jump to when you went to college.
Sure.
You know, at the time of your life, everybody here can relate to.
Let's talk about that.
I wonder what college you went to.
I did, in fact, go to the University of Illinois. I know.
So how did you decide what you were going to major in? Talk to us about your academic decisions. Yeah.
That was very, very tough because unfortunately, like a lot of people at universities like this, you know, I was interested in everything. And one of the things that actually kept me at the University of Illinois, you know, besides the fact that they offered me a free ride, which is always helpful, right, was that the College of Engineering there had just recently, in fact, the very year I started was the first year they did it, rolled out a dual degree program where you could get a Bachelor of Science in Engineering and a Bachelor's of Arts from the College of Arts and Sciences. Right? And I was like, well, I'm interested in so many things. This way, so I ended up getting a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Engineering and a Bachelor of Arts in Classics and Ancient History, okay? Which is a fun combination, by the way. Very interesting to see how that fits together. With that combination of degrees, I actually ended up working in a history museum, actually at the University of Illinois, and I built all of their database systems for them, and I ran all of their technologies, and all of this, right, exactly. So I did this for a few years, and then somebody came to me and said, do you know that you're doing library science in a museum? And I said, I don't even know what that is. And they said, do you know that the University of Illinois has the nation's best school of library information science? I said, I had no idea. So they said, you should go talk to the dean. So I went and I talked to the dean and said, I'm over here in this museum and I'm building all these databases and we have all of these information management problems and we're trying to figure out, you know, controlled vocabularies and metadata standards for sharing information about museums and collections. This is all very difficult. Do you know anything about all of this? And she's like, yes, we've been studying that for the past 100 years. I'm like, okay, that sounds great. So that's why I went and got my PhD in information science. And
so you finished your bachelor's degree with what?
A Bachelor of Science in Computer Engineering and Bachelor of Arts in Classics. Okay. Well, technically it was in history, but that was because, anyway, if you want to do ancient history, yeah, I took a wide mixture of classes across both classics and ancient history. And I actually came very close. You'll actually appreciate this. I'm not sure if I've ever told you this, but everybody knows here that Ken is a famous musician. Infamous? No, famous. If you've never heard Ken play bluegrass, you are absolutely missing out. So if you ever have the opportunity to listen to the Kenny Hill Band, please definitely do that. Shameless plug for Kenny Hill. I spent a lot of time, like a lot of people, playing classical piano. Right, from a very young age, and the instructor that I studied with was a professor of piano pedagogy at the University of Illinois. So when I ended up going to the University of Illinois, instead of my parents having to pay for piano lessons, we were like, oh, well, shoot, I'll just enroll in his piano performance classes. And he was like, this is great. So you didn't have to pay for piano lessons anymore. And as I was wrapping up, it actually took, the way they had this dual bachelor's program was actually a 5-year program to do the bachelor's in engineering. I ended up with 196 credit hours over 5 years. I nearly took like one 4-hour course at the end just to say I had around 200 numbers, and I didn't. But anyway, we're looking at all the credit hours. I've got all these credit hours towards the engineering degree, and I've got all these credit hours toward history, right, and classics, and then I have all of these credit hours in the College of Music, right? And at one point, my piano instructor said to me, you know, if you take these handful of required courses, you could also get a 3rd bachelor's degree from the College of Music.
No way.
Yeah. I had everything but it was like 12 credit hours. Would have added another semester on, and I was a good piano player, but I don't think I would have been a good College of Music student. So yeah, I said no, but it would have been really interesting to have left there with 3 bachelor's degrees from 3 different colleges, engineering, arts and sciences, and music, because I don't think anybody has ever done that.
Anybody here?
Anybody? Yeah? 3 bachelor's degrees? Yeah?
Anybody in any one of those areas?
Engineering.
Engineering students?
No. Classics or history? No. Music?
No, we lost them all.
Well, I had the opportunity yesterday afternoon to talk to a group of students at the College of Music. It was actually a very interesting conversation. They have a quartet here visiting called the Ariana String Quartet. I got to hear them play. They're wonderful. And when they talk to College of Music students, they ask the professor to invite a professor from a different discipline to come in and talk to them about interdisciplinary connections between music and their discipline. So I was invited to be that professor. So we talked about information science and music, and I actually felt really bad because they had a wonderful idea which I had to kind of dash, because they said to me, we've been thinking really hard about this and we want to bounce this idea off of you. Let's say the notes on the page are data and the music that we play is information. And I'm like, no. No, we're not doing that. So
Yeah, we could do a whole half hour talk on that.
well, I was going to say that with data information. No. Exactly. Yes. So that's yes. Undergraduate degrees in engineering and history, and I worked in a museum, and I went and got my PhD in information science, and that actually took me directly to my role here.
Did you always know you were going to go to grad school?
It was hard to say, right? It was. Let me talk a little bit about the University of Illinois at that time. How are we doing on time, by the way?
Oh, we're about
All right, we're doing good. So the University of Illinois at that time was very advanced with technology and computing. Any of my undergrads in here? No?
I guess not.
No? Okay. Well, then you wouldn't have heard this story before. When I was an undergraduate student, I had a number of different job offers where to work. I mean, I had been programming since I was 6 years old, right? And lots of people needed to hire programmers in the late 80s, early 90s, right? There was a brand new building that had just opened at the University of Illinois called the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, right? And they wanted to hire me to come program for them. Never heard of them before, and no idea. So I turned them down. I went and worked as a programmer for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, because everybody had heard of the Army. And that, by the way, was a fascinating place to work as an undergraduate student. I developed databases for them. I did a lot of programming for them. I built all kinds of systems for them. It was really interesting. It was mostly civil engineers. Any civil engineers in the room? Well, we already asked about engineering. Yeah. Civil engineers are a very interesting group of people, and building database systems and writing programs for civil engineers was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about programming, learned a lot about databases. It was a great experience, but I wasn't working at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, but a number of my friends were. And I'll preface this by saying that the name I'm about to say was not a friend of mine, but we weren't enemies or anything, although we might be today. But we weren't enemies, but we were in classes together, all right? And it was a guy by the name of Marc Andreessen.
Oh, I know him.
You know him?
Yeah.
Anybody in this class know Marc Andreessen? Yeah, that sounds like a familiar name. So Marc Andreessen, when he was an undergraduate student at the University of Illinois, same as me, right? We were in classes together. He took a job offer to work at NCSA, the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. Yes, and while he was there at NCSA, he developed a little piece of software called NCSA Mosaic. Anybody ever heard of NCSA Mosaic? Okay. NCSA Mosaic was the world's first graphical web browser. Okay. So he developed this, came out in 1993, and Marc Andreessen then turned that into a company that maybe you've heard of called Netscape, right? I was in classes with Marc Andreessen. We did have a friend in common. That friend in common was asked to invest in Netscape, and he made millions of dollars. I was not asked to invest in Netscape. I was not. Yes. So I always tell this story to my undergraduate students as an example of the importance of networking. Right? I always say, frankly, you should go to more parties. You should get to know everybody in your class, because you never know when you might miss out on a great business opportunity because you weren't friends with somebody like Marc Andreessen, right? And actually the story of turning NCSA Mosaic into Netscape is a very interesting one from the university's perspective of commercialization and technology transfer, because when Marc Andreessen was looking to fund Netscape, his backer was Jim Day from Sun Microsystems.
Yep.
Okay? But Jim wanted to make sure that the University of Illinois had no claims on any of this software, because Marc developed this, yes, as an undergraduate student. Now, a lot of you are undergrads. As undergrads, you do have the ownership over the software you develop, but, unlike grad students, by the way, but Marc developed this on the job at NCSA using NCSA computers. And it was branded NCSA Mosaic, right? And they wanted to use the code to develop Netscape. So Jim Day and his army of lawyers goes to the University of Illinois. Okay, let me back up. If you go to the University of Illinois and their unbelievable computer science complex, Thomas Siebel, who's the big donor there, Siebel Center, unfreaking believable, right? You walk into the computer science department in the University of Illinois, like the building just drips millions of dollars. Like it just comes out of the wall fixtures, right? I mean, you can just tell how much money has flowed through this building. It's unfreaking believable. You walk into a building like that and they say, home of the world's first graphical web browser, right? All of this stuff, the invention of the internet, PLATO, all of this stuff is all there. The story they don't tell you is, Jim Day and his army of lawyers walked into the University of Illinois' tech transfer office and said, we need to purchase the rights to this particular piece of software that this undergrad student who was here. It's a graphical web browser, all right? And the person at tech transfer was like, well, I don't know what that is. How does $10,000 sound, right? And Jim Day, who's the CEO of Sun Microsystems, who probably had $10,000 in his back pocket, right? That sounds great. So the University of Illinois signed away the rights to the world's first graphical web browser for $10,000, and then that turned into Netscape. So where were we going with that? Technology, innovation, creativity.
Well, we might need to tie in some D&D.
Let's go back to some D&D.
So tell me something.
Yes.
Why is Dungeons and Dragons associated with a nerdy culture?
Well, see, that's interesting because in the 70s and 80s, it definitely was associated with a nerdy culture, right? Because it was a bunch of people who, would sit around in their parents' basements and use their imagination, right? And then, of course, at the time of the 80s, having lived through it, right, the demonic scare, the satanic panic, right, all of these things associated with Dungeons and Dragons, right? And a lot of people were very sad once they discovered that there really wasn't any Satan worshiping going on. Instead, it was just improv and math. So I said improv and math, not meth, okay? Improv and math, right? But now D&D, of course, had a complete resurgence, right? Everybody's playing D&D. Famous people are playing D&D because everybody likes the social aspect, the collaborative aspect to it. So here, 5e did a lot to bring that back. Yeah. Let me jump back. So that's the Monster Manual, the Player's Handbook, and the Dungeon Master's Guide from 2014. This right here.
We're gonna get too tall for the camera here.
There's the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Monster Manual, and the Player's Handbook, 1979.
It is a demon meth thing.
There is. And in fact, like if you look at this one here, right, in the 1990s, they explicitly removed the demons from the covers specifically to try to get around the satanic panic stuff, right? So this is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So the problem is, D&D was invented in 1974 as basically an add-on to an already existing tabletop game called Chainmail. And Chainmail was a tabletop game for simulating basically medieval combat. All right, and then the people who were playing it, including in particular Gary Gygax, right, was like, hey, I'm more interested in the role-playing aspect than I am the actual combat aspect of this. Could we add a storytelling component on top of the combat mechanics? So the very first version of Dungeons & Dragons that was released in 1974, I do not have a copy of that, I'm sad to say. It is available online as a PDF. I actually have the PDF. I even printed it out, but it's not very exciting because it's just a printout of a PDF, right? Was that overlay of the rules, all right? But you already had to have chainmail, anyway. So in 79, Gary Gygax released what he called Advanced Dungeons & Dragons as a complete standalone set. So if you had the Dungeon Master's Guide for the person who's running the game, the Monster Manual, so in here we have all the stats for every monster that you might fight. Oh, look at this. It's a carrion crawler, right?
It looks so ancient.
Deal with one of those. Yeah, look how ancient this is. And look at the drawings, right? There's a bugbear up there, right? And you could play these games completely in your imagination, or it was more common to do, because it had its origins in tabletop combat, right? So you'd have like a map or a grid or graph paper, and you'd have tokens for the monsters, or in particular, let me put this down for 1 second, all right? Here, I'll give you these books. Okay. I brought these, so I'll see how these show up. All right.
Ooh.
These
3D printed?
These, no. These are Grenadier lead figures from 1983, probably, right? Only one of them is broken. This wizard right here, you can see he's supposed to have a fireball shooting out of his hand, but it's not there. I have the fireball, but I never reattached it. So I don't know if you can see these very well on the camera, but So having figures like this or tokens help people visualize what was happening. You would need it mostly in combat, right? So you would kind of know where everybody is to organize combat. But, so the advanced Dungeons & Dragons came out at 79. At the same time that was happening, there was a bit of a schism. Because at the same time that TSR was releasing that, somebody else said, I have an idea for turning Dungeons & Dragons into its own standalone set. And so the game actually divided into two. So Gary Gygax pushed this, other people pushed, right? And there is the original red box. Actually, we're gonna come back to that. There is actually the first basic edition right here, all right?
That's the purple box.
The purple box, right? Exactly. And in here is the first one that I bought. So there you go. This is 3-hole punched for a binder, right? The first, there's the basic rules, 1981, right? Right there. And I've got characters in, there's character sheets in here, I've got lots of characters in here, all kinds of stuff, right? That was 1981. 1983 saw this. Where's Jackson? Because he asked, yes, you had, so this is the Beckme set, right? So the basic, expert, companion, masters, and I don't have immortals, sad to say. But and this introduced a lot of people to this. But the idea was that like the basic rules were supposed to be a gateway to the advanced rules, and that never happened because this basically turned into its own separate system. And then second edition AD&D came out, and then really everything kind of came back together with third edition. Now at that point, I wasn't playing D&D anymore because my friends and I moved to a system called. Pull this out. Let's do this. Rolemaster. Had anybody here ever heard of Rolemaster? Yes. Have you played it? All right. So Rolemaster is a D100 system. So D&D is primarily focused on rolling D20s. So this is all focused on hundreds, right? And it's unbelievably complicated. So if you were the sort of kid in high school who liked doing extremely advanced math, this was awesome because I'll give you an example of how combat worked. So this is the player's handbook, right? This is this entire thing is specifically just for combat. This entire book, right? Casting spells was just as complicated. All right, and this is their monster manual, also treasures. Give you an idea how it would work. If you were in combat, you would roll a D100, and by the way, you roll D100s. It's 2 10s, right? Where one's doing the 100 digit, another doing the 10s digit and one. You know what I mean? So you would roll a D100. You would add your attack bonus, and you would subtract the defender's defense bonus. Then you would compare with the roll against their armor type. Okay? Some similarities, right? Adding up the offense bonus was extremely difficult because all those numbers were situational, right? So it wasn't like one number. You had to re-add up what your offense bonus was depending on terrain and flanking rules and all sorts of stuff. It was different all the time. Same thing with the defense bonus was also variable every time too. So just one attack involved a tremendous amount of math to figure out in this situation what's your offensive bonus. In this situation, the person you're trying to attack, what's their defensive bonus. You rolled D100, you added your offensive bonus, you subtracted your defensive bonus, you took that result and you compared it against their armor type on a table specifically for the weapon you used. This book is every page is a different weapon. So I'm going to open to a random page and see what we get. That's a dagger. That's not very interesting. There's a hand axe. Let's jump around. Here we go. Here's a broadsword. So you're not going to be able to see all these little numbers, but if you were attacking somebody with a broadsword, this number along here is the total number you get. It goes from 30 up to 150.
All right, so I think you just answered my question about the nerd factor.
There you go. Exactly. So just to finish this example.
We got about 3 minutes.
3 minutes left. So just to finish this example, right? If I was attacking them with a broadsword, I find the number, I compare against their armor type, and then I get a result right here. And the result here tells me how many hit points of damage I did, yes, but it also directs me to another table where I have to roll again
my
to
God.
see if there's any critical, here we go, critical damage. And then there are critical tables here for all the attacks, right?
So to share with us how all of this and all of your studies led you to where you are today.
Right. So where I am today, I should say this. So this is my 23rd year on the faculty here at FSU as a professor of information science. I'm now also the Associate Vice Provost for Academic Innovation. And what I do in that role is I work to build interdisciplinary connections among faculty in different departments who are interested in big picture topics that cut across our disciplinary boundaries. People keep asking me, is your role to make our faculty more innovative? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. Our faculty are unbelievably innovative. We have brilliant, innovative faculty in teaching and research in every department across this campus. What we don't do, however, is a very good job of spreading those innovations across our disciplinary and departmental boundaries. We don't do that internally across our different units. You know, one professor over there has a really great idea that might help another professor over there, and they never get together to talk. They never see each other, right? We also don't share across disciplinary boundaries, right? So you've got a professor of chemistry who comes up with a really cool idea that might help everybody. Where does he publish it? In a chemistry journal, right? But your professor of English isn't reading the chemistry journal, right? So we're stuck within our silos. So what I've been tasked to do is find a way to tear down those silos and encourage interdisciplinary innovation.
And are you using a broadsword for that?
No, I am using the Innovation Hub for that. Because the Innovation Hub is the broadsword that will cut across our departmental silos and deliver a critical hit to the there we go. All right. So the same way that we have the Seminole Innovator program that brings students together, Ken and I have just started a Faculty Innovators program that is bringing faculty together in this space to discuss really important ideas. So this semester we've been talking about generative AI. It's certainly a topic that interests faculty in every department on this campus. This coming Wednesday morning, we're doing ours at Wednesday morning because it's like we're doing ours like a coffee hour for faculty, right? So this coming Wednesday morning, we're going to be talking about generative AI in medicine. So there'll be faculty from nursing and medicine, but also communication information, right? And there's so many different colleges that are doing work with FSU Health right now, right? We're going to have a demo Wednesday morning. Je He, who's a professor in the School of Information, and Mia Lustria, who's also a professor in the School of Information. Je is also the interim director for the Institute for Successful Longevity. They're going to do a demo of an NIH-funded project that they have where they build a customized LLM to help older adults interpret their blood test results. Right? So you think, right, you go, you get your blood drawn, you get all these numbers, right? That's a lot of information. Well, so what they're giving the people is a specialized URL just for them. They click on the URL that takes them to an AI that they can talk to about their particular blood test results. It's secure, nobody else has access to it. You can say, why are my creatine levels so high? What does that mean, right? And you can have a conversation with the AI about your blood work, and in theory, that will then prepare you to then go and know the right questions to ask your doctor and things like that when you meet with the doctor. We're going to see a demo of that on Wednesday, and that should hopefully kick off a really great conversation about the role of AI in medicine. But again, the goal here is to bring together interdisciplinary faculty around shared interests to use the broadsword to cut across our silos.
And it's the same thing as we do for students here, right? I mean, it's the exact same mission. Bring together students from different disciplines to get to know each other because we know innovation lies at the crossroads of disciplines. Yeah.
Let me just show just a couple more things because I got a couple things in here that if I don't show, I'm going to be very, very sad. One of the reasons that we switched to Rolemaster, all right, is because Rolemaster had the best collection of modules for Middle-earth. So if you wanted to role play in Middle-earth, there's Rangers of the North, the Kingdom of Arthedain.
There you go. This
This one includes complete statistics for Aragorn the Ranger, Gandalf the Wizard, and many important hobbits.
Yes.
All right. I've got Riders of Rohan. I've got Lorien. I've got, this one was great. Mirkwood's in here, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah, I've got so many that I didn't even bother to bring, right? But these give you the setting in which to play. And all of these are full of mini adventures and big campaigns and everything. And D&D does a good job of providing starter sets. How many people have played the starter set Lost Mine of Fandover? Yes, lots of fun. A great way to start.
Same hand keeps going up.
I know, absolutely. I tried to find the first starter set that I ever played. And I know I have a copy of it. I think it's my friend next door neighbor who also has a big D&D collection. I think my copy's over at his house. And I didn't want to break in his house and look for it this morning. I tried to find it because, of course, the first D&D adventure I ever played in 1981 was Keep on the Borderlands. Anybody play Keep on the Borderlands? Where's Jackson? Jackson played. What? Yep, there we go. Keep on the Borderlands. FYI, the 50th anniversary of D&D is coming out right now. The new starter set that's coming out next year is going to be an updated version of Keep on the Borderlands. So look for that. It's a classic from 1981. I couldn't find that one. I did, however, find this one, also from 1981, The Isle of Dread, which was a lot of fun because you end up shipwrecked on this island and there's like dinosaurs and all sorts of stuff that you got to figure out to fight. And people often ask me what's my favorite 5e module to run. And
That's what I was going to ask.
there we go. All right. Now, okay, we got guys. Okay, I have run it twice, and the players have defeated Straub both times, so I'm sure I'm doing something wrong. If anybody ever wants to try, I'll run it a third time for you. See if I can kill you all.
Well, Dr.
There you
Mark,
go.
I've learned a lot.
Great.
More than I can even absorb here. But how can if students want to take one of your courses, what would you recommend?
Well, that's getting increasingly harder because as I get dragged more and more into administration, I'm spending less and less time teaching. But something that I said to the Provost office when they asked me to take on this role of being Associate Vice Provost for Academic Innovation, as I said, I can't talk to other faculty about innovating in the classroom if I'm not in the classroom, right? So even though they were happy to buy out all of my time and have me not teach, I said no. I will continue to teach one course a semester moving forward because I don't want to be out of the classroom when I'm doing this sort of experience. So unfortunately, I'm cutting back to one course a semester moving forward, which is going to make it more and more difficult for you to take one of my classes. And even more unfortunate, unless you're in the honors program, the course I'm teaching in the spring is an honors seminar. I'm teaching my honors seminar in the spring on the unintended consequences of information technology, colloquially known as Is Google Making Us Stupid? And we have a really fun time in that class. It's a really great conversation.
Well, I've known Dr. Marty for many years. He's an incredibly accessible professor. He loves to talk to students. Paul Marty, just Google him. You'll find out all kinds of information.
That's right. Reach out anytime. Marty at FSU gets to me.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you again.
For being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.